They're initiating a capture of the Dragon. Stand by. Capture is confirmed.
So what's amazing about this is those people there cheering, they weren't NASA employees. They weren't anything to do with the government. It was civilians working for a private startup. SpaceX. Elon Musk started the company. So I was lucky enough last Wednesday to go and have a tour of the factory. But Elon, sadly, wasn't there because he was running his other startup, Tesla, trying to make electric cars cool. And that's not all he's doing. He also set up another company, Solar City, which he runs with his cousin, which is now America's biggest supplier of home solar panels. I just think all the rules have changed now. We're in a place like this with the Apollo rockets downstairs, funded by multi-billion-dollar government research programs, and a startup can now come along and take some of that space. So there's a phrase you hear quite a lot when you travel in Silicon Valley. It's people like Elon Musk having a healthy disregard for the impossible. And it's a phrase I think we need to hear more over here. It's favored by Larry Page, the Google founder. When he was at the University of Maryland, he went on a weekend leadership course organized by this organization called Reshape. And their manifesto is to create leaders who've got integrity but a healthy disregard for the impossible. So I'm just going to look through some of the trends that are happening, particularly in technology now, in how we're connecting with each other and why there are new opportunities for all sorts of businesses to do things that we thought until very recently were impossible. So, Larry Page is already doing some of these things at Google. There's Google Glass, another way to interact with other people through social networks. Self-driving cars. This is a blind man driving one of the Google cars. They've done about 300,000 miles on the highways of California. Would you feel a bit weird driving a car without hands? Well, probably not, because it's safer. It gets you there, it finds the parking space. The rules have changed. And I think we're at the beginning of an era of accelerated change, this word disruption that we'll hear a lot about, partly because of exponential changes. And I'll explain the word exponential. So in December, I was at this place just near Google's campus on the NASA Ames Research Park called Singularity University. I was writing a cover story for our magazine, set up by Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis to try and train the next generation to come up with these big solutions to the impossible problems. At Singularity University, they talk about exponentials. They're trying to solve problems for 10 to the 9 that will affect 1 billion plus people. And they constantly drill it in your head that if you go on a linear growth curve, if you count the numbers 1 plus 1 is 2 plus 2, and so on, after 30 steps you get to the number 30. But on a doubling exponential curve, you get to more than 1 billion in 30 steps. And that just seems like maths, but it's actually fundamental to how the world is changing. You all know Moore's law. This is one of Ray Kurzweil's graphs. Processing power is doubling roughly every year and a half, and that's continuing. It's not yet met its physical limit. Well, the same thing's not just happening with computer processing power. It's happening with the cost of solar panels. It's happening with the cost of decoding a human genome. In fact, biotech, genomics, is progressing quicker than Moore's law, in that the cost is plummeting. So a decade ago, you'd have had to have a nice $3 billion to decode a single human genome. Last year it was $2,000. Soon it's going to be the price of a cup of coffee. And that changes the fundamentals. That changes how we predict our physical health outcomes, crime, everything. And you know, the pace of acceleration of consumer devices is accelerating. If you see 50 million devices as mainstream adoption, do you remember how excited we got about the smartphone? It took 7 years, but now this new device, the iPad and some of the Android tablets come out, and within 2 years we're at 50 million. And whatever the next device will be even quicker. So some interesting things are coming out of Singularity University. There's some spin-off companies that are coming that are doing crazy things to try and solve these 10 to the 9 problems. So this is one of them. This is a startup called MatterNet. And the problem it's trying to solve is, how do you get physical goods, medical supplies, other things, to people in hard-to-reach areas, in African villages when the roads are not passable, in earthquake zones? So they've created, or they're building, a mesh network of drones that can carry just a few kilos, but the drones can go 10 kilometers in 15 minutes. And they have GPS. This is one of them in Haiti. And they can self-steer, and then when they get 10 kilometers away, another drone can pick up the goods. So this is a nice idea, but you think what it could mean for Federal Express in the center of London. You know, the rules have changed. Technology is becoming incredibly cheap, incredibly powerful. There's another startup that's trying to solve a problem. Lab-grown meat. You know, one of their issues is it's quite cruel to farm and kill animals, plus there's a lot of CO2 produced, takes a lot of land. If you can make steak, and also they're going to start with leather because they think it's slightly easier. That's what's going to be for dinner. And they've got funding from people like Peter Thiel. So there's exciting opportunities there. There are no limits to the way these people think. This is a company that's mining asteroids for mineral resources.
With technological advances that are coming out of exponential technologies and investors willing to bear the risk, small teams are now able to do what only governments and large corporations could do before. Our vision is to catalyze humanity's growth both on and off the Earth. We're breaking ground. Now is the time for us to gain access to these resources. And at the end, the entire human race will be the beneficiary as we expand our reach beyond the Earth into the solar system.
That's a business opportunity, right? But they're doing it. They've got funding. So where are the opportunities right now if you don't fancy setting up an asteroid mining company? Well, 3D printing. It's about to hit the mainstream. So already for about £500 or £600, you can buy simple 3D printing devices like MakerBots. But already, and there's quite a lot of 3D printed products in this museum. There's a London company called Within Technologies that makes these medical-grade titanium 3D printed spinal implants that fuse to your bones. Engine blocks, very, very finely printed layer after layer, additive manufacturing. At the Wired conference 18 months ago, we had a 3D printed Stradivarius blade. It had been scanned and then printed out using a composite material. It sounded pretty good to me. There's all sorts of ethical issues. You can now get 3D printed guns. This is one picked up by the feds. Oh, and the other thing you can do is you can hack DNA now. You can go into labs. There's one I went to in California where you can learn how to take bioluminescent DNA and put it into something else. So some people have created the bioluminescent cat. So where is this going to end? One person I talked to was working on a plan to try and create street lamps that glow in the dark, save energy. But the big obvious short-term opportunity is, you know, in the scene in The Graduate where Mr. Maguire says to Benjamin, I've just got one word for you, one word. So it wouldn't be plastics now, it's going to be mobile, because we are at the beginning, still at the beginning of a massively steep rising curve, which you have to be on, because 5 billion people with mobiles, just 1 billion with smartphones, and that is going to equal out over the next 2 years. And the number of devices out in the field on the mobile internet is just, again, exponentially growing. If you look at the 1990s, the PC era, there were 100 million units out there. The beginning of the consumer internet, about a decade ago, maybe 1 billion. But already now the predictions are there are more than 10 billion mobile internet devices, and that's your games consoles, that's your car. It's not just your mobile phones and tablets, it's your wireless everything. And people change their behavior on the mobile internet. So this is PayPal's total annual mobile payments over the last couple of years. And just look at that steep growth curve. So if you have a business and you're not making mobile your first priority, go home. Haven't seen last year's figures, but you know it's just going to be somewhere huge. So we all remember what happened to these guys. The irony is, this is Stephen Sasson, who invented the digital camera. He was working for Kodak in 1975, but it threatened their business plan, selling film, so they kind of buried it. How different to this team of 13 people who sold themselves to Facebook for $1 billion last year. So you're not going to stop that technology. It's going to come along, and you might as well disrupt yourself before somebody else does. So finance is about to take a major disruption. Jack Dorsey, among other people, trying to create new platforms for mobile money exchange. This is the Square. Again, the price of the devices is coming right down. So you can go to Alibaba.com now, and I was just thinking, you can get a fairly advanced spec Android phone for $50. That's £31, and you only have to buy like 3 or 4. You don't have to buy hundreds of them. So you know that next year it's going to be $30, and soon these will be pretty much throwaway devices. And we're going to not see our engagement with a device. We're just going to be engaging with our content, with our games, with our loved ones through the network, through the cloud. So if you go to talk to the games companies, I talk to Electronic Arts, they no longer see themselves as selling a game. There's not going to be a wrapped game that you take to a console. In their demo labs, they're working out how you'll be able to play the same game with the same people at the same place you left off on any device. Your tablet will project to the screen in the corner of the room. You'll pick up on your cell phone when you're on the bus later. And it's about creating an engaging, free-to-play experience. They're going to be free, the games, but then you will pay within the game to advance more quickly with virtual goods and so on. So this is, you know, the games companies, all the rules have changed. And then data. So we hear this buzzword of the year, big data. But what does it mean? This is Eric Schmidt actually said here about 2 years ago that in all human civilization till 2003, collectively we produced 5 exabytes, 5 billion gigabytes of data. But when he said this, we were producing the same, I think it was every day or every 2 days. The pace was accelerating. But the last time he updated this, he said we're producing 5 exabytes every 10 minutes. And that's all your Skype calls and your Facebook updates and pretty much everything. So what are the opportunities when you've got the data? Well, you can start understanding your consumers better and targeting them. Target, big American retailer, got into a bit of trouble last year when the New York Times reported that one of its executives had said, because of the data we're gathering and the algorithms that we have to spot patterns, we know that your teenage daughter is pregnant long before you do. I think he got slapped for saying that. So Walmart does a lot of semantic analysis. It analyzes the social networks, and it spots trends. And they spotted that there was a lot of buzz about this thing called the cake pop, which is America's latest contribution to the obesity epidemic. It's kind of thick cake on a lolly stick with extra sugar. And they weren't aware of it, but the algorithm told them, the data said this. So they started stocking it, and it became a best-selling item. So you should go to a place called Kaggle.com, where data scientists can compete to solve problems that corporations post. There's often a cash prize. So this healthcare insurance company offered a $3 million prize to see if you could look at the data they were giving, the historic claims data, to predict which patients were going to be the most expensive over the next year or two. So you get a feedback loop. with all this data, and you can fix things. And the feedback loop is what makes games companies so effective, because when you're playing Farmville, you're not playing the same Farmville as everybody else. They A/B test. They separate various combinations, how quickly the characters move, what color the background is, to work out, just by measuring, which engages you, which gets you spending more. And that A/B testing idea is increasingly entering mainstream uses. So the Obama campaign 2008, this was their sign-up page to get people to join, but they did A/B testing. They changed the picture in the middle, some videos, some photos, and the sign-up button. They changed some of the wording. They did 24 combinations, and they found that the one that got the most click-throughs was actually this image. Nice family picture. It doesn't say sign up, it says learn more. But what's really interesting is the difference in click-throughs between that one and the first one. The first one was just over 8% click-through. That one was nearly 12%. They wouldn't have known that just by analyzing it themselves, and they calculated that meant an extra $60 million in donations through the campaign. So follow the data. At LinkedIn, they have a bit of fun. They're obsessed with data, and some of the things they correlate are the number of letters in a boy's name and the job they end up doing. So if you are naming your son, if you want an engineer, choose a 6-letter name. If you want them to work in a restaurant, 7 letters. If you want them to be CEO, it's generally 4 letters, Jack or Fred or Bill. Although sales people is also about 4 letters, so I accept no responsibility for what happens to your son. So Sergey Brin was intrigued by all this data and all this genomics. His wife set up a company called 23andMe, where you can get your DNA analyzed. You send off, I think it's about $100 now, it's come down, for this tube, spit in it, and a few weeks later you get a very detailed breakdown of your risk factor for 100 illnesses, whether you're likely to go bald, where your family geographically originates. And then you get an inbox saying, we've got 827 cousins of yours in our database. And it breaks it down into first cousins and second cousins and third cousins. So I did this, and I got emails like this inside the system. Hello, my name's Alison. I'm contacting you because we share 0.62% DNA on 6 segments, and we could be distant cousins. Do you want to chat? I didn't chat with Alison. I still had all those Facebook requests and LinkedIn requests, but you know, this data leads to new information. You might learn things that surprise you. So the crowd is connecting in creative new ways. So it's happening in all sorts of sectors. In finance, the peer-to-peer loan market, Zopa, where you can set the rate at which you lend your money, started slowly, but they've now had more than £250 million through the network. But what's really interesting is what's happening on Kickstarter at the moment. So anybody can post a project like the Pebble Watch. They wanted to raise $100,000 to make it a viable project. They made 10 million. So these are the people behind it.
This is my smartphone, and this is my Pebble.
So the great thing is you don't have to be a big consumer products corporation.
It runs a lot of cool and useful apps, and connects wirelessly by Bluetooth to your iPhone or Android smartphone.
Yeah, this is the team. So anybody here, you can make a consumer product. And it's happening in music on Kickstarter. People like Amanda Palmer, kind of punkish musician, is funding her album. She wanted $100,000, got more than $1 million, and you can buy a CD for $10 or a download for $1, or for $1,000 she'll come and have tea with you. $10,000 she'll perform at your house. So crowdfunding is suddenly a huge thing. It's not going to go away. It's happening to inventing as well. So there's this site called Quirky, where if you have an idea for an invention, you can post it to the network. It's voted up. Their bid is to democratize inventing, and then they make the goods, and then they sell them for you. Have a look at quirky.com. So these crowds are doing all sorts of creative, interesting things together. So patient groups are combining on platforms like Cure Together to find out the truth, rather than what the pharmaceutical companies say, about how best to medicate themselves, to treat themselves. So they had a one-year study of people in the community with depression, and they measured what was most popular and most effective. And you know, the drugs were way in the left-hand bottom corner, but if you want to get out of depression, it's more useful to do exercise and get adequate sleep and spend time with your pet. Alcohol and caffeine are not so helpful. Alcohol's right at the bottom. It's happening to education. So the Khan Academy, fairly amateurish site. Sal Khan started posting videos for young relatives. By this morning, 237 million views for the maths and science videos. So it's becoming a real threat, a real challenge to the mainstream universities. So Sebastian Thrun here from Stanford set up Udacity to teach artificial intelligence courses. Hundreds of thousands of people all over the world in Bangladesh are taking those courses. Barriers to entry are disappearing. And you have to realize that, you know, each of us in our own company probably doesn't have all the answers, but now is the time where you can go outside. Bill Joy, founder of Sun Microsystems, famously said all the smart people don't just work for you. Now you can access them. So a few other things that are happening as we speak. The Internet of Things is becoming a reality, and that means sensors in everything. So at the moment you can get things like this light bulb, smartphone apps. You can control the brightness, you can set it when you're on the other side of the world. Security, spying on people. The military nano hummingbird. This is the picture this little hummingbird is providing. You are never, ever going to be able to do anything in secret again. But you haven't got anything to hide, have you? Human enhancement through technology. Again, we're learning how to improve our performance physically in all sorts of worlds. So cochlear implants, for instance. Imagine you've been born deaf, and then you can suddenly have hearing. So this is a baby hearing for the first time.
It's coming back on, and he's back on again. See how he turned?
Hi, Jonathan. Stop for a second. Hi. Good. Could you hear this? Hi, sweetie. Could you hear that?
So technology, you know, can transform lives if used properly. And you know, we're getting used to talking to our mobile devices and telling them what to do, but you know, that's just the beginning. So we had IBM's Watson on Jeopardy winning over the humans, but that, you know, that's old news. That's a while ago. What's happening now is real-time language translation. This is a Microsoft executive, Rick Rashid. He's talking in real time, and it's translating into Chinese, but with the inflections of his voice.
Again, the results not perfect. There are in fact quite a few errors. 结果并不完美。There's much work to be done in this area. 在这方面有很多工作要做。
So this is just a couple of months ago. So think where this is going to go in 3 or 4 years. Machines are also learning how to read our emotions. So you go to MIT Media Lab, they have cameras above one of the labs. So when you're walking past, it shows you in real time whether you're happy or not so happy. And there's a spin-off company called Affectiva out of that lab, which is using people's webcams at home to read their facial expressions to see what they think of adverts. This is a Dove advert. And they correlate second by second, you know, whether you're concentrating, whether you're unhappy. They're using this to optimize film trailers. This Italian company is now using these mannequins in stores that monitor who's looking at the products. Big feedback loop. This is a female young Caucasian. Although the artificial intelligence is not perfect yet, Google thinks it knows what you want based on other people's search requests. You get to learn a lot about people, actually. The autocomplete. let's move on. So automation is accelerating on an exponential curve. This is a company in Boston, Boston Dynamics. Go and have a look at their YouTube videos. They're fantastic. They do a lot of work for DARPA, for the US military. Animal-type robots that can take heavy goods onto the battlefield. Sensors all over them. They can fall over and find their way up again. And then scientists at the University of Pennsylvania are doing formation flights with quadcopters again. This is like ballet for machines. So all the tools are there. All the tools are available. The price is coming right down. Use your imagination to work out what you want to do with them. Slightly worrying bit of this artificial intelligence revolution is there are companies like Narrative Science that are now algorithmically writing news stories. So as a journalist, I deplore this trend, but city reports, sports reports, you can't stop it. So, disruption everywhere. Look at YouTube. People upload this much every minute, and it's transforming the nature of stars. So we did a cover story last month on the teenagers in the UK who are making hundreds of thousands of pounds a year through their YouTube channels. They don't want to go on TV because that would constrain them, that would limit them. They have independence. And Michelle Phan, one of the YouTubers, heading towards 1 billion views, but they're now a retail platform, and the makeup companies have to deal with her. So they're doing contracts with her because she has reach. $2 million a year turnover. So every industry, hotel industry with Airbnb, massive growth curve. Bitcoin is interesting. Bitcoin is an algorithm-generated currency that's growing pretty fast and is now being accepted by businesses like WordPress. And it's a challenge because it can go across borders and do governments have any control over it? So what happens? So there's some clever uses of this technology, the GPS, the designed interface. So I used, for the first time last week, a service called Uber, which is a taxi service linked through an app, and the driver knows where you are and you know where the driver is and you rate each other. Makes life a bit smoother, gets rid of some of the friction. And at the same time, the idea of technology disappears as the natural user interface emerges. Do you remember Minority Report? It's kind of a decade ago. This is John Anderton. So science fiction a decade ago, but it's here now. It's not surprising now. It's easily enactable. So I'll leave you with a couple of thoughts. First of all is Clayton Christensen, the Innovator's Dilemma writer. So there's always going to be persuasive reasons not to take a risk, but if you do the Kodak thing, you'll get passed by. So all of us have our set ways of doing things, and there's a reason not to disrupt the short-term revenue stream. So my business, Condé Nast, shiny magazine publishing, but it's changed. So we launched 4 years ago, but our business is now, we do apps, we do consulting. We have a consulting business. We do for-profit conferences. So, where is the value that you're adding to the internet? One of our sister magazines, Vogue, in Moscow is now a cafe. In London is about to launch a college of fashion and design. GQ is a bar in Moscow. You have to be careful to stay fairly close to your brand values. Cosmopolitan, a few years ago, became a yogurt, which I don't think helped anybody. So it's all about adding value to the internet now. There's a commodity internet where the price of services, even of physical goods, is heading down towards zero. So how can you design experiences that stand out? How can you get rid of the friction in people's lives? So I'll leave you with the great optimism that I have about technology because it can solve real problems. Like when your Facebook feed is full of people's baby pictures and it gets really cheesy and annoying, there are solutions now. So this is Unbaby Me that turns all these pictures into much more acceptable images from the internet. And that gives me hope that we're entering a better era. So I'll leave you with Douglas Adams, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy writer, who was a great philosopher, who worked out that anything invented before you're 15 is the order of nature and how things should be and how they always have been. Anything that comes along by the time you're about 35 is kind of exciting and you might have some career benefit. But anything that comes along, any technology after you're 35 is against nature and should be prohibited. So I would say hang around more with the 15-year-olds and see what they're doing, because that is the future of your business. Thank you.